Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from whichever part of the world you may be joining us. Welcome to your Apigee and Application Integration Community Tech Talk and Office Hours. Today, we have a really interesting topic and really great speakers that are new to this session. So let's get things started. If you are new to this community, this initiative was originated in Madrid by Luis Cuellar. He is a manager custom engineer in Madrid, and he had the intention to create this space for practitioners and enthusiasts on all API management thing and the new addition to this great product from Google Cloud Application Integration. So you can have this community at your back always that's going to be able to support you and empower you. So you can have these spaces for knowledge sharing, and you'll be able to accelerate the adoption of these ever growing and ever adapting technologies. So welcome to your community. We have very simple rules for these sessions. We're going to have presentations by Google Cloud experts. Today, you'll have the pleasure to have two technical solution consultants from Google Cloud Apigee. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A, and you can bring your questions related to the topic. Or if you'd like to address something else, we'll be more than happy to look into that. If not, we can always take things online and get you answers through our community forums. We will meet almost every Thursday with some exceptions and some holidays and days that we need to be preparing some content for you. And this session will be recorded and you'll be able to find it through the community. We'll also share it through our YouTube channel. So keep an eye on that in case you cannot miss, in case you miss one of our sessions. And this is the regular call to action that I always like to make. If you would like to share your knowledge with the community, you're more than welcome to join us in this stage. So you can always just reach out through us via the community or LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to accommodate you to be the presenter in this scenario. With that, I would like to make a note that we will go through the questions at the end. You can always use the chat or the Q&A so you can share your comments or inquiries you would like to share with the speakers. And well, today's session, we will be having the pleasure to have Sai and Miguel joining us for this session. Both of them, they are technical solution consultants at Google Cloud for Apigee and application integration. So welcome, everyone. I'll hand it over to you, Sai, and let's get things started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Yes, no, maybe. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we have a nice discussion / session for the next few minutes. We're going to talk about how you can accelerate Apigee API development with YAML and templates, right? So let's get started. So this is the quick agenda of what we will be covering as part of the session. So we'll talk about the current state and challenges that we see out with Apigee users. Then we talk about how Apigee GoGen tool. I don't know if you've heard of Apigee GoGen or if you've seen it. We'll talk about Apigee GoGen as to how it will help you accelerate your development process. And then we have a cool demo to show you on what Apigee GoGen can do or can offer. And finally, we'll open up for some questions for you all to ask. Sounds good? So let's get started. So before we get into the actual meat of the discussion, I wanted you all to actually confirm me that you can actually see the Google Meet emojis on the Google Meet that you're all on. So can you, everybody, just click the emojis? Awesome. And you guys can see different emojis, right? You guys can see the thumbs up, heart, celebrate, everything, right? Awesome. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do some questions. And for every question, we have an emoji next to it. So I just want to get a pulse of how many of you are, falling in each bucket so that we can actually smoothen our conversations or double click on certain points, depending on, the different users that we have here. All right. So let's get started. So the first question is, how many here use Apigee? Please click the Apigee, sorry, the heart symbol, please. All right, awesome. Let me do it from my side too. Awesome, thank you. Sounds like we do have a lot of Apigee users, which is great. Next question is, how many here use the Apigee UI to build Apigee proxies? Okay, that's quite a good amount of hand there. The third question is, how many here are aware or use the Cloud Code extension in VS Code to build Apigee proxies? Okay, wasn't as high as using the Apigee UI. I also see a thumbs down. Okay, we'll take that. How many here have built custom tooling or workflows to generate Apigee proxies? Okay, not a lot, but there are a few crabs coming through. Awesome. This is good to know. So from what I see, a lot of Apigee users, and most of them use the UI. They're aware of the Cloud Code extension, but don't really use it. And a very few of them have actually built custom tooling or workflows to make the Apigee proxy code generation faster. I guess that's a good landscape that I've learned from this exercise. Awesome. That is precisely what I was thinking when we were getting into this particular discussion. So let's get to the actual content, right? So if I can go to the next slide. There you go. So the current state and challenges, right? So typically we get a lot of these questions that are asked, right? So the questions are, hey, the current development process, the proxy development that we do today with Apigee is kind of boring, difficult, strict, right? So can we do something better or make it more interesting for developers, right? Because at the end of the day, Apigee is a bunch of policies and proxies that you configure and you just change values, and that's pretty much it. So how can I make it better? And this we get a lot, right? Why are you on XML, right? So this is completely a common question that we get very often. The current development setup seems complex, right? There's a lot of moving parts. How do I make sure that everything is assembled together, and we can make sure that everything is streamlined for my API proxy development to be more easier? And then do you have any tools or any utilities where I can use or embed that into my development ecosystem to make the overall proxy development or improve the overall efficiency of a developer to get faster or make it much easier, right? So these are some questions that we get commonly, and I'm sure many who've joined this call are also going through that phase or are interested to know what can be done to make it faster, right? So we're going to talk about that. And lastly, how do I make all these, or how do I embed all these to make it more consistent so that my developers can be more efficient, right? So we're going to talk about all these or try to address how we go and talk to our customers or talk to different folks out there who are trying to make this process easier for them. So before we jump into the actual GoGen tool, I wanted to see or show the different options of how you can actually create an API proxy in Apigee, right? So you basically have different ways of doing it. Like as we had asked earlier, right? You use the Apigee UI. This is the mostly or very popular way of, for developers to learn how Apigee proxies are built. All right. This is probably the best recommended way to start learning about Apigee as well, using the UI, because it helps you build proxies very quickly. It's very intuitive. So you can start using it as you build. Then you have tools, right? Once you've gone into the concept of how Apigee works, for the automation side or from a CLI perspective, there are many open source tools that we have made available via GitHub repositories. For example, OpenAPI to Apigee, where you bring in an OpenAPI spec to generate the proxy. Then you have WSDL to Apigee, which takes a WSDL file and converts that into Apigee. And then finally, you have Apigee CLI that helps you with anything along with Apigee. And it also helps you generate proxies also from an OpenAPI spec. And lastly, we have a DevRel repository, which has a lot of proxy templates that you can copy from, and then you can use that within your automation, right? So these are different ways that we've seen other customers use and build. Then the other option is using the Cloud Code extension. We did get a few show of hands from the earlier poll of people knowing about the Cloud Code extension and using it to do everything offline and building their proxies. And I'm sure there are many, many more, right? These are the ones that we have supported as part of the setup that's already available and publicly known. But we have seen a lot of customers who build their own utilities that are internal that they use for enhancing their Apigee development. But to start off, this is something that we hear all the time, right? XML, it feels outdated and it's kind of cumbersome, right? Because it's very rigid, because XML is known for its formatting and it's for its way of how tight the schema is. So it becomes a little difficult for everybody. So it always feels outdated. We actually found this code from the community some time ago. It's a pretty interesting code. So it's just not us who feels that; it's probably the community out there as well, right? They feel editing those XML files is a cumbersome nuisance. Also, again, I don't see any XML specific feature adding value to the process of designing Apigee proxies. Right? It's a very, very fair statement, and a sentiment that that we keep hearing a lot. So I just wanted to echo the sentiment that we see in the community as well. But this all comes because of the way how the Apigee API proxy bundle is, right? It's a very rigid, not very flexible kind of a structure, because it's packaged in a particular format of how each folder or subfolder needs to be. And in individual subfolders, you have a specific set of files that needs to go in, right? For example, the targets need to have the target endpoints. The proxy needs to have the proxy endpoint configuration, and the policies will basically have all the policies that you configure. And then if you have any custom resources, then you put it under the resources directory, right? So it's a very compact and tight folder structure with specific files that needs to go into individual folders, and each of those files need to have or adhere to certain schemas, right? So that's where reuse and customization becomes a little tricky. So what happens? We end up, or customers end up building bespoke tools or one-off templates that basically are used to generate these proxy code. Because at the end of the day, when you create API proxies, you have certain policies that needs to go in, like for example your security policies, your rate limiting policies, your logging policies to start off, right? So you basically want to generate proxies with those at a bare minimum, right? So you basically end up writing tools that will copy paste files all over and then generate the proxy structure, and then you deploy that into Apigee. So we see a lot of copy paste scripts written that will pick files from different repositories and then merge that into a single proxy and then push it. So there's a lot of bespoke one-off tools that customers are building to come up with different templates, and it could be confusing, it could be error prone, whatever, right? So when we see proxies from OpenAPI spec, these are the tools that we have, like OpenAPI to Apigee, Apigee CLI, and I'm sure there will be more. But there is a problem here, right? When you do this, it's a very static, or in other words, it's just a base skeleton. So when you take an OpenAPI spec, it understands the structure of the OpenAPI spec and converts that into a proxy, but it doesn't put anything on top, right? So if you have made changes after the proxy is created, then it's a little difficult, because next time when you generate the proxy again from the OpenAPI spec, you lose all of that. You get another skeleton proxy, right? So in other words, what this happens, your API proxy is not in sync with your OpenAPI spec. Or in other words, if you make a change to your OpenAPI spec, then you have to go back and catch up on what changes you have to make on the API proxy. So very easily, you lose the significance of one being in sync with the other, right? So that's become a bigger challenge. These tools are super helpful. I use them a lot. I encourage everybody to use. But at a given point of time, as you make changes to a given proxy, keeping them in sync becomes a little tricky, right? But as everybody knows, you always need something more, right? Customers are saying, hey, these tools are good, but it's only a good starting point, but I need more. What is that more is what we will be talking about. And the challenge that, as I said earlier, right, it actually diverges very quickly. So you end up getting into ending up into a one-way wall where you basically don't know what to do, because the OpenAPI spec either gets in advance compared to the API proxy, or the vice versa, where the API proxy gets advanced and the OpenAPI needs to do a catch-up. So it's always good that we do them together in sync, because at the end of the day, your API spec is the final contract, and that is what needs to be built into the proxy, and it should not be the other way around. So what do we see that platform teams do generally? Platform teams who manage Apigee, at a bare minimum, they want to make sure that every proxy that gets deployed has policies injected into them. And what are those policies that they are looking at a bare minimum? is their security, which handles, like the API key or auth0 or authentication. It could be governance, where you're making sure that you have a logging policy, you're managing the error codes, you have a proper fault handling when there is a non 2xx responses. And then access control, right? Where does my API code go? Which repository is it? Who's managing that repository and whatnot, right? So that's what the platform team are responsible for, and they want this to be automated as much as they can, because they don't have to worry about what the code is. They want zero or almost zero manual intervention. They want to create a streamlined process where developers can use the platform and build the APIs quickly, and the platform team will enable the development team to build that platform for them so that they can build API proxies quickly, right? So that's the essence of how the platform team works very closely with the API team, right? So what solutions are we seeing out there? We are seeing customers or the platform teams coming up with different templates, and they give the choice to the API team to pick from different templates. And each of these templates can have different things into it, right? Like, for example, within the security, you might ask, do you need API key authentication or do you want OAuth? So when you select OAuth, it will pick that appropriate policies. Do you want to validate the request and the response against the OpenAPI spec? Yes, then it adds that policy. Do you want threat protection policies? Then it adds those. Do you want rate limiting policies? It adds those. Logging, you don't have a choice, it automatically gets added, right? So you basically can enforce different templates that injects different types of policies based on the input of what the API team wants, right? So that's what we're seeing a lot of the in the community, where the platform teams are trying to build these different templates, looking at the different patterns that they see being built. They come up with different templates, and managing these templates can be a little tricky. And then what they do at the end, they use that template to generate a proxy, and that proxy is having a particular structure that they have built, and they create a repository. They put all the files in it, including the proxy code that got generated with all the files injected, create the deployment file, create the test scripts if there are any, and all of that, right? So they basically generate the entire repository with all the structure that will be useful for developers to just start off with. And finally, what happens? You will have to inject your custom pipeline or your workflows with another systems for approvals. Like, for example, if you are asking for some approval, then that will trigger a workflow system like app integration, a ServiceNow, or Jira, and that will basically be built into the ecosystem to start creating all these proxies, getting the right inputs. If something is not available, open a ticket so that they can build that platform. The platform team can build that for you and all that, right? So there's a lot of you're creating a workflow that might end up looking complicated because it's not very flexible, right? So that's what we are seeing a lot being done by customers out there, right? And we want to make it easy. So what are we doing for this? We have come up with a tool called Apigee GoGen. Can I get a quick show of hands through emojis if you've heard of this tool? Okay. The more thumbs down, the better. Okay, awesome. So I saw a few thumbs down, which means we're not, and this is a perfect session, and this is exactly why we wanted to have this session. Perfect. So this is the GoGen tool that we have, and this tool basically does exactly what we see as a gap with customers, right? What does it do? It basically helps you author API proxies as YAML. Yeah, you heard that right. It is all in YAML. You can include anything and everything in YAML, be it the proxy code, be it the policy code, anything and everything that you do in XML can be in YAML, right? And the beauty is that it can be all in one file, or it can be across different files, and you can actually refer them through the $ref that YAML supports. So as you can see here on the screenshot here, in line number 19 and 20, the policies.yaml file is a totally different file that has a list of policies all in YAML. You just refer to that. So think of it like you have a different structure or a different folder structure with all your policies, and you want to inject it. You just have to write one line of code here. The tool will automatically pick all the values here and generate it for you. Okay. What else can you do? You can build any proxy policies using the tool. It supports all of these policies that we have out of the box. And the best part is you can do everything in YAML, as we keep talking about it. The XML to YAML journey starts off from here, where you can basically build everything in YAML, and you can use that in your source code, and then behind the scenes, GoGen can do the conversions for you to push that to Apigee. The other important aspect is that it supports Go style templates. You can use this to generate API proxies using an OpenAPI spec and inject different policies based off of different Go style template conditions. Like as you can see on the screenshot here, depending on the different values and different inputs that you give to the tool, it will automatically use that as conditional statements and create the proxies based off of a business flow or a logic that you've built inside of your template, right? And then by doing this, the most important gap that we see with customers is the sync between the API proxy and the spec, right? Here, you will always make sure that it is always in sync. Reason being, your spec changes, you run this tool, it will generate the proxy. So at the end of the day, the main source of truth is going to be your OpenAPI spec and the template, and the proxy is just an aftermath of what you've generated using this tool, with spec being the main contract, right? So it's always going to be in sync. And you can automate everything with absolutely zero to very less human or manual intervention. And the demo will talk about all that later today. So some of the command categories that we have are transform, template rendering, and mock generation. Now, what does transform command means? It basically has a lot of subcommands within the tool where you can use YAML to XML, XML to YAML, because since you have a lot of documentation out there that is talking XML, you can take a snippet of the XML and convert that to YAML and store that file. You can do JSON. You can convert an existing API proxy that you already built and convert that into YAML. So it'll spit out the entire YAML file for you. You can do the reverse of that. The same thing is possible with Shadflow as well for YAML, between Shadflow and YAML. You can convert an OpenAPI spec 2 version 2 Swagger to an OpenAPI 3. It supports overlays. I don't know if you have heard of OAS overlays. If you want to update certain features of an OpenAPI spec, you can include an overlay file to change the actual OAS file, right? All that is supported in this tool. Lastly, it supports resolved refs. If you had a $ref notations anywhere in your YAML file, it can basically resolve that for you. It's all that is available as part of the transform feature that we have. From a rendering perspective, your Apigee API proxy, that is a YAML, becomes your template, and then you emboss an OpenAPI spec on top of a template to generate the proxy with all the different policies embedded into it, right? So we'll talk about that in a bit. But at the end of the day, you can run it manually, or you can have it run by a CI/CD orchestrator that will take an OpenAPI spec from wherever you have, run it against a template, and generate a proxy for you and deploy it automatically to Apigee. So you don't really need to spend time in adding the policies on top, right? So we'll talk about that in the demo. The other important feature that you could do with this particular tool is mocking, right? Now with mocking, what you can do is you basically can generate mocks, which could be static or dynamic based off of your OpenAPI spec. It will generate automatically the schema that you've mentioned as part of the examples in the OpenAPI spec. You could do request validation to make sure that everything is fine. And lastly, it also supports course init, right? So you can basically embed and generate a proxy and push that into Apigee with a mock backend. So this is typically how a development cycle becomes once you start incorporating these kind of tools, right? You have a CI/CD pipeline that takes the code, and this is nothing but the OpenAPI spec and the template. It generates the code. Then that pipeline can push that spec into API Hub. That same API proxy that is generated by the tool can be pushed into runtime. And lastly, once the automation test is completely executed and everything is green, it can publish that spec into the developer portal as documentation, right? So what are you touching as part of this process? You're doing code quality analysis as part of your pipeline. You're injecting policies as part of the generation of the code. Then you're testing it by running unit test and integration test. Lastly, you're publishing that into your portal and making it available for external consumers. So at the end of the day, your spec becomes the source of truth for the proxy code. And it also becomes the source of truth for external consumption as well in the portal, right? So you have multi-use of why the spec needs to be updated and always in sync. All right. So with that, the boring slides are done. Now it's show time where I hand it off to Miguel, and he's going to show you how this particular tool works. He's going to get into each and every nitty-gritty thing of how the tool can be used and how it can be embedded into your CI/CD. Right? Thank you. I'll stop sharing, and Miguel, you can take over the screen.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? Please give me a thumbs up. Yes. All right, perfect. So yeah, it's showtime. So let me jump into the demo right away. So what I want to show you is basically kind of like from scratch the experience, so you can see how these tools sort of evolved and how to use the different commands, like I show you in the deck, like the transform command, the render command, and finally, if we have some time, we'll show you the mock. So normally in API, you start from the UI, right? That's a typical thing that most people do, that you create a proxy and for example, you can do like a reverse proxy and you could point into like, HTTP bin.org, and then you can just like I'm just going to show a simple proxy, right? And then we're going to use this as a starting point. So let me just go make sure I got this correct. Deploy it to eval. Okay, so once you have this proxy, typically what you do, right? You start working here on the UI and you start adding policies and all that, right? So what we're saying with this tool is that if you already have a proxy like this, you can grab this proxy, convert it to YAML, and keep working on it as YAML. Or you could do it the other way around, where you start as YAML and then bring it here into the UI, import it into Apigee. So since I already have this proxy, let me just download this now. And let me now go and show you the experience from the CLI type of thing. So I already have a few commands here already. Let me copy the zip that was just downloaded, HTTP bin zip. Have it in here now. Hopefully this terminal is big enough for you guys to see the code. I cannot see the screen, so I don't see the emoji, but
It looks good, Miguel.
Yeah, okay. So we had this zip file that I downloaded, right? And this is what, the structure that I was showing you earlier. So the first command I want to show you is this transform command. I think I might need to change this. So the transform command, we're going to take the zip file that we have from the Apigee UI that we downloaded as input, and we're going to output a YAML file, right? So this YAML file is the representation of everything that's in this zip file as a single YAML file. So let me go ahead and run this. And you can see created a new folder here, and new folder with the API proxies and YAML file. And let's take a look at what is in here. So at the top level, the YAML file has basically structures for each of those sections that you saw inside the proxy. It's got the API proxy section. This is kind of like the metadata file for the API proxy. Then you have a policies array. Right now it's empty because we didn't have any policies in the proxy when I downloaded it. Then you have a proxy endpoints section. We have a single proxy endpoint, the default one, because that's what the one we downloaded had. And we had the target endpoints array also with a single target endpoint. And finally, resources. We don't have any resources in here. So technically, you could go from here and start making changes to this YAML and then go back and convert it back into a proxy bundle and deploy that. But what I want to show you is kind of like a little bit of a experience of, okay, what if we wanted to add policy, right? So I took a spike arrays example from the doc. I literally just went in and spike arrays earlier and just copy pasted this example right here. And you can use also the transform command to take a snippet of XML and transform it to YAML and directly put that in the API proxy. So let's just run this. So basically, I'm piping this into the gogen command and running the transform command. So once you do that, it spits out the YAML that that represents the same XML that you use. So there, so we can take this and go into the proxy itself, go into the policies, and we can put that policy now here in the policies array. I mean, since you guys are Apigee developers, a lot of you know that just putting in the policies array is not enough. You have to go and put it in one of the flows. So I'm just gonna go in the pre-flow in this example. I'm just gonna put it on the request path. I'm gonna add a step and name, and the name is gonna be this the spike arrest policy. So that's basically the editing process. So right now, this is not a template. This is just a static file with proxy that has one policy, right? You could take this. We'll have another policy later, but you could take this and convert it as is. So you can take the input, which is this YAML file, and output a proxy bundle out of it. So if I copy this, let's paste it. You can see now we have a new bundle here, and you can see in the policies, we have the spike arrest policy. And if we go into the, I'll make that bigger. And if we go into the proxy itself, we see that, in the pre-flow, the actual spike arrest policy got included in there as well. Let's add one more policy just so you can see, and then we'll deploy this proxy. So let's do the quota policy as an example. So I'll get the YAML for the quota policy. I'll go and add it to the array, and also add it now here. Now, one thing I want to show is because this is conversion from XML to YAML, there's some things you have to do. For example, in this case, if I want to add another step, I couldn't just do step name and put this quota policy in there, because it's not valid YAML anymore, right? Because that means this is a duplicate key. So what you do here, you just do add a wrapper around it and say, hey, this is a data element, and you put the each of the steps as array elements in there. So it becomes like this. So now you have on the request path, you have 2 steps in there. So now we can run the conversion again, and hopefully we should see the 2 policies in there. Now you can see now the zip was regenerated. You can see the quota policy and the spike arrest. And let me, just for the sake of completeness, you can see it's in here as well. And if we go into the proxy, now the quota policy is in here as well. All right, so in theory, now we can take this and deploy it back to Apigee, and we'll get revision 2 being created. So if we go over here, now the tool that I used to deploy back to Apigee was the Apigee CLI. It was not the GoGen tool. So there's 2 different tools. The GoGen is for transformation and for rendering, and Apigee CLI for deploying and interacting with the control plane. So you can see just now, last modified, and revision 2 is being deployed. And I saw a question earlier, how does it look like in the UI? It's still XML in the UI. This hasn't changed. So what we're doing is we're allowing you to have this experience on the on your workstation or through the CI/CD pipeline, where you're working with YAML, and the zip bundle that gets deployed to Apigee becomes just a side effect or a generated thing, right? So your source of truth is really the YAML now. Okay, so what if we wanted to make this a little bit more dynamic, right? I want to change the rate for the spike arrest and the the count for the quota policy. So I could make this into a template, and in the decks I mentioned it supports Go style templates, and what that means is you put placeholders, and in those placeholders you use references to a context that is passed in when doing rendering. So in this case, the $.values contains all the context that's passed in during the rendering process. So you could say here SA spike RS rate. So when we render this template, because now it's a template because we have a placeholder, the value of SA rate will be replaced in here. And let's put another one here, Q count. So now it's a template. Now it's not anymore a static file. So if I were to render this, I would need to pass in values for each of these. So next, instead of doing a transform, so you saw all the previous commands were transformed from YAML to API proxy. The other category of command is rendering. So we're saying, hey, render an API proxy from this template. So notice it's the same file, and just now referring to it as a template. And it's not a static file anymore. Now it's a template. Output a bundle, right? And set these values in the context, Q count and spike RS rate. And this will look a little bit familiar to you because if you work with in Kubernetes, you have Helm, which is a very popular tool, and a lot of these parameters are very similar to what Helm uses for template rendering, also the set command, and it's inspired a lot by the Helm tool. So if I run this now, let me delete the proxy, the bundle that's in there, rerun this. Now we have the new bundle that's created. We can take a look at the quota policy, and it's got the count in there, and which should be the value that we passed in. Q count, similar for spike RS, 15 per minute, and it's 15 per minute. So hopefully you can start seeing how powerful this can be, right? You can put this template in your source code, right? And as part of the CI/CD pipeline, just ask for these values. You know, what is going to be your quota account? What is going to be your spike RS, right? And deploy a proxy from that. Now, these are just two parts of it, right? Sai was mentioning earlier that you can use OpenAPI specs. And we'll see that later, that an entire OpenAPI spec itself becomes the input to the rendering process. And you can create a proxy from an OpenAPI spec. So let's look at something else that's pretty cool to do here, which is, what if I want in my template, I don't want these policies anymore to be embedded in this single file. Maybe I want to reorganize it a little bit. You can use $ref and basically point this element, this entire element, to be basically a $ref pointing to another file in the file system, where you say, path to file that YAML, right? And you could even address some nested element in there. Right, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to use include directive, which is similar to what is done with Helm charts. And I'll show you how to do that now. So first, let's put the policies in a new file. Let's just call it policies.yaml. So I'm just going to dump those policies in here. And basically, you put this include directive. And I'm saying, hey, just grab the contents of this file and treat it as a template, because it already has template replacements, placeholders, and render it. And the result of that, just put it in here, right? Whatever gets rendered, put it into this. And you can go many levels deep in here, right? There's no real limit into, the only limit is you cannot go outside of the folder where you start in, one level up, but going deep, you can go any number of levels. All right, so let me drink some water. How much time do we have? Okay. So now that we have this, we can render it again, and it should work the same. Oh, I think I have a issue somewhere. Error line 16. Let me take a look, make sure I copied it correctly. Spike RS. Input API Proxy YAML. Yeah. I think I might have done a Google here somewhere and copy pasted this incorrectly. Let me just put it back in here. Make sure this still works.
You're running the transform command.
Is it in the transform command?
Yeah, you've been running transform.
Oh, oh, of course. I copied the wrong command.
Yeah, it should be the render. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I thought I was telling you, but I was on mute. My bad.
We just put it back. Yeah, render command. I had gotta put this in my scripting here, in my little cheat sheet. All right, so the render command in there. So same change. Like I just put this in the separate file. You can have the the policies outside, and they still get included in here. So if we move on, the next thing I want to show you is like, what if you have conditionals? Let me just copy paste in here. Don't keep getting the wrong thing. So what if you want to have conditionals? Let's say I want to have a policy put conditionally, right? So let's say I have an API key verification policy. Grab that, go to the policies file, add the array, and add the element to the array, but I don't want it to be included all the time. I could do something like this, where you say if that dollar values, right? So just like we have in here, values, and then pass in some Boolean, check key, or just gonna say check API key. And so this becomes if conditional, where you're saying only render this stuff inside if this is passed in with the value of true, right? And similarly, we'll have to add it to the another step. And let me grab the name of the policy, API key verifier, and we'll make this one also conditional. If $that values, check API key, and do end. All right, so now when we run the render command, let's go back over here. And basically, we're going to pass in the same values we passed before, but we're going to pass a Boolean that says, hey, whether we want to add that policy or not. So let's say if we set it to true, let's clear this, run it, and you can see now the API key verifier policy is in there in the policies directory. And if we open the proxy itself, you can see it's also in there. But if I rerun it and say false, you can see it disappears. Right, so you can have this sort of conditionals as well. There's a lot more constructs. You can have for loops. Basically, if you go and read on the Go template in language, everything that you can do there, you can do here. So it's using the same engine under the hood. And obviously,
hey Miguel, quick question. It's coming from the chat. The policies file that you added in the folder, that can be anywhere, right? Because you're using the include, as long as it's a file path it can reach, it should be able to pull that for you, right? It doesn't have to be in that folder.
No, it has to be in a folder underneath this. It can be outside, so you cannot have. I cannot go out of the. Let me see, where is it? Outside of this HTTP bin and go out to bundles, right? But if there's other folders underneath this, like let's just make it up, just some name like food, right? You can.
The question is, can I have a full path that is pointing to a file that is totally outside of the HTTP bin, and can it still work?
No, I mean that's restricted on purpose because we don't want the tool itself to be accessing resources on the file system outside of the context that you're doing the rendering. So the entry point is the proxy YAML. Anything relative to this, you should be able to access.
Got it. Hope that answered the question, Amit, Philip.
So you can do this, foo, and put it over here.
But it has to be from the current directory that you're running it from.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's like gelled into that directory. I mean, it's open source. If that's something you want to change, you could always remove that line in the code that does it and make it do a jailbreak.
Yeah.
But by default, it's gelled into that directory. All right. So next step. Okay. So let's actually deploy the proxy. So what that's deploying? So this thing we have here now, it's a template, right? Because it has placeholders. But what if instead of doing this stuff like this, we want to use an OpenAPI spec as input to the template and create an API proxy out of it, right? So we have in the Git repo, we have a directory for example templates, and we have a bunch of templates, one for OpenAPI spec, one for gRPC, for GraphQL, and even one for MCP. But for now, I'm just going to show you OpenAPI spec. So basically, the concept is still the same. You are doing a render, right? And you're taking a template as input. Let me export this in here. You're taking a template as input. And also, I'm giving an extra argument here. This is where you can have extra helper functions to using your template. And instead of doing like set file or set value, like I'm saying set OAS. So basically I'm passing in this OpenAPI spec as input to the rendering process for this template. And I'll open up this template so you can see what is in there. Template, API proxy. So it's the same stuff I showed you earlier, just now there's more placeholders and it's grabbing stuff from the spec that's passed in as input. Like the description comes from the spec description. The conditional flows is basically a for loop that goes through all the operations in your input spec and so on. So it's more complex, obviously, but it's because it understands what an OpenAPI spec is. So if we run this in here, you can see it actually printed some stuff in here. I'll explain that in a second. But now there is a new bundle in here where it's a pet store that's zip, basically this one right here, that was generated from the pet store API. Hopefully you guys are familiar with what the pet store API is, right? That's like the quintessential example that's used by the OpenAPI spec initiative to demo OpenAPI. So now that I have the zip, I can go and deploy it to Apigee. Let's deploy that as well. And let's go ahead and take a look in the UI. So let's see API proxies. Let me refresh this. So you can see the pet store that I just deployed. And that the input to that was literally just the pet store.yaml, right? This spec. The template itself I had in the example, but this is basically the input, the pet store.yaml. And if we open that up, you can see now in here the description. This came from inside the OpenAPI spec. And we have basically conditional flows for each and every operation that is in there. And we have a few policies that are being added already that were part of that template to generate this proxy. So I think it should be already deployed. Yeah, it's already deployed. So we can actually, now that it's deployed, we can actually even make a call to it. Let's see, test it. I don't think, let's see if the API key is going to work, because I might have to get an API key. Oh, I don't have API key validation in this one. So, but you can see, I made the call. And it's just pointing to an echo server, but you can see it worked. That's actually this proxy that let me just do a debug session, just to show you how much time do we have. We have 10 minutes. Not sure if if we should start with Q&A now, or should we jump into the mock section? What do you think, Sai?
Let's do a quick run of what the mock is, and then explain how we can do mocking with this, and then probably jump onto Q&A.
Good.
I've been answering a lot of questions on the chat. So
okay. So I'm just gonna run the curl again. You can
So,
see.
Miguel, back to your older thing, right? So looking at the questions that people are asking, right? So at the end of the day, you can actually create templates like the one that you just showed,
Yeah.
that can have conditions in it to automatically generate or render proxies based off how you pass, and that business logic of how it renders for different conditions can be baked into the template, right? Like, for example, if I have certain conditions where I don't want to generate certain part of code, or if I want to not include a particular policy or exclude a sets of policies, then you just put them as conditions, or you could have some loop or whatever you want, or you can have a different policies.yaml file, and then based off of that condition, you can pull that file for you and then generate the proxies, right? So you can come up with different templates that can have different policy sets, and you can pick and choose however you want, correct?
So yeah, that's exactly right. So just to get your gears in your mind running a little bit more, when I run this render command for rendering from the OpenAPI spec for Pet Store, you saw that there were some outputs in here that I had. Let me just run it again so you can see. It printed this, skipping internal operation add pet and skipping internal operation delete user. So where did this come from? So if we go to the actual template, you'll see that in the for loop that I have in here that basically goes through the spec, I have this if statement in here that says, if the visibility of this operation is internal, print this message, skipping internal operation. And you can see it's just a printf basically, right? And it just continues, right? So it basically skips that iteration in the loop. So what did this do? So basically in my OpenAPI spec, I had, let me open the spec itself. I had some operations that I tagged as internal. I had this extension, xVisibility extend internal. So if the operation had this, it means that we're not rendering it.
So in other words, you're basically using some of the existing metadata that is already available in the OpenAPI spec, using that as an input to generate proxies based off the different values that could come from the spec, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So
That makes sense.
the spec itself could contain the metadata itself that you want to use for the rendering process, plus your own custom metadata, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's show the overlays maybe before we jump into the, we can answer questions at the same time. So keep the questions coming. So if you can read them out.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know if you guys are familiar. There's this new standard called OpenAPI overlays. OpenAPI overlays. And it was announced not too long ago. And basically, it's a specification that allows you to basically have a file that defines a set of changes that you want to do on an OpenAPI. And when you apply this overlay onto an OpenAPI description, a new file is output with those changes applied. And this could be deletions, insertions, or updates. And that's supported in the tool itself. So you pass in your spec itself, your overlay file, and the output. So in this case, this same pet store spec that I have, it's the input, and I have this overlay file that says, hey, delete internal operations. So if we look at my overlays in here, let me show you this overlay file. So what is this overlay file saying? It's saying, here are the actions, and then using a JSON path, locate all these elements and remove them. Right. So, and this is just one of the actions. Like I said, you can have delete, updates, and or add new elements to the spec using the overlay mechanism. So if I run the
feature, just for the folks here, this is not something that the tool is doing. It is just a specification given by OpenAPI initiative group, where you can actually define certain values that needs modification in a separate file, and then render a new OpenAPI spec based off of that.
Yep. So once I run this, you can see we should have a new in the output directory. output pest or overlaid right here, and it should not have any of the internal operations anymore. So if I basically compare this with the original that was input right here, compare these two, you can see it's a deletion, right? So here on the left-hand side, we have the new file. The right-hand side, we have the old. So basically deleted this one, this operation, and deleted this other operation that was marked as internal.
Yeah, so a practical use case for folks here is to have an existing spec, and if there are some changes that are required, you could use the overlay to make the changes on the spec and then run the GoGen to generate an artifact or a proxy out of the overlaid file and then push that to Apigee.
Yep. Cool. How much time we have?
We have 3 more minutes.
Rather than demoing, I'm just going to go through on the documentation. So let me go up on the Apigee GoGen tool. So if you just search for Apigee GoGen in Google, you'll get to the GitHub repo. And then in the GitHub repo, like I said, it's open source, everything is in there, but you can jump over to the docs here. It's just a Git site for the documentation. And you would have this section for mocking. So the idea for mocking is that you take as input a spec and output comes a zip, but this proxy bundle basically already has policies hard-coded for generating mocked responses for every single operation that you have in this OpenAPI spec. And it has a support for many features comparable to other products that are out there that already do this as well. But you can do this purely in Apigee without having to spin up a cloud run to do a mock server. So, and again, it will pick everything from your spec and generate the proxy. So it supports cores, and it supports request validation. It supports having dynamic status code based on what's on your spec. So you could pick one of the responses from your spec, or have it randomly pick one of the responses that's already in the spec when it returns you the response. Similar for the content type, if your spec says that, hey, I have JSON and application XML, you could request, hey, give me a random response that's application JSON, or give me a random XML, or just pick one of the two at random and just give me the content as well. So that's for the response body. It also supports repeatable responses, so that if you want to make a call and have that same exact identical response returned to you the next time, you can pass a seed value. So the random number generator that's used internally is seeded with that number that you pass in. So it will be deterministic at that point. We don't have time to demo it. You're welcome to try it, and contact us in the community, because we can answer all any questions you have in here.
That was my last action item for you all, right? To try this particular tool. It supports that you can run on your terminal, and it also has a package manager that's available via Docker. So you can run it via Docker also for your CI/CD processes, right? So all of that are available. Try it out, and and reach out to us via the GitHub issues, and also contribute, right? So if you have any ideas that you would like to contribute, we can go over the GitHub, and we can run them with you.
Yeah, like I said, we have the releases. So all the releases are there basically for Windows, Linux, and Mac. And the current beta right now, we're adding support to generate proxies that basically behave as MCP servers. So that's a pretty cool thing if you want to go try that out. It's not documented yet, but it's built in there, and we have the MCP template. And we have the Docker image as well. So if your CI/CD pipeline is based on Docker, you can just grab the Docker image and use that in your Jenkins file or whichever CI/CD pipeline you have. All right, I'll stop sharing now. I think it's already.
That was a really great session, guys. Thank you so much for this. So everyone, last chance to share your last question. If not, shout out to Sai for sharing all the answers to the chat. I'll make sure I'll share the digest with you when we share the recording. So for now, anyone wants to open their mic or raise your hands to make a last question?
Yeah, great questions on the chat though. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So to start wrapping things up, I opened the feedback so that you can cast your vote on whether you like this session or not. So your feedback is really, really important to us. You just have to go to your right top corner and select the option and the feedback you would like to give to this session. With that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. A special shout out to Miguel and Sai for this great presentation. I'll make sure I'll share the recording and the digest of our questions. So we look forward to seeing you, everyone, next month, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.